yesterday's attacks and other things.
Some say that he does have ties to Muslim extremists. I don't know.
Eight years after the so-called Arab Spring, popular movements in Algeria and Sudan led to the ouster of two long-serving autocrats. Algerian President Abdelaziz Bouteflika, who resigned on April 2nd, and Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir, who was removed from power on April 11th. The two uprisings bear striking resemblance to the 2011 revolution in Egypt that led to the fall of then-President Hosni Mubarak. In both, youth movements, opposition parties, labor unions and human rights organizations have united to oppose repressive authorization regimes. Through funneling concerns about unemployment, inflation and police brutality into calls for political reform. Just as in Egypt in 2011, military top brass have intervened in both Algeria and Sudan to force the dictators out of office, only to take control of their country's post-revolutionary transitions. Following Mubarak's ouster, an awkward transition to democracy caused disagreement among Egypt's revolutionaries, and their divisions paved the way for a 2013 counter-revolutionary coup that restored military rule. The architect of that coup, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, went on to declare himself president and establish a regime that many believe is more violent and repressive than the one toppled in 2011. Since then, el-Sisi has sent thousands of dissidents to prison and clamped down on the press and civil society. Looking back on what has happened to Egypt, Algerians and the Sudanese are staying on the streets, calling for a complete removal of the autocratic regimes that have long dominated their societies. As for Sudan in particular, the prospect of repressive state violence still hangs over the country.
ونحن عندنا أخوات بنعيش يا بنموت حرية سقطت ما سقطت ما سقطت.
إحنا من طالب بحرية وحكم مدني من أجل عيشة شريفة وعيشة أمينة. نحن السودانيين دماغنا حارة ما بنرجع إلا ما لم تتحقق أمانينا. أنا بتفاوض عليه ما حد يسمى تفاوض. كانت هناك بتتفاوض معي وهنا بتقتل فيني. أتفاوض على شنو؟ لحد هذا التاريخ اللحظة النظام القائم هسه حاليا في السودان نظام البشير.
Riven by ethnic conflicts and dominated by a complex security apparatus of regime-affiliated parliamentary forces, the country could be at the precipice of bloodshed and turmoil, as Alex Duval, an expert on the Horn of Africa, puts it. On 3rd of June, security forces and parliamentaries fired on pro-democracy protesters, holding a sit-in outside army headquarters in the capital Khartoum, leaving a number of people dead and many more injured. The recent violence in Sudan is particularly reminiscent of the Rabaa massacre of August 2013 in Egypt. In that event, Egypt's military and security forces raided 2 protest camps and attacked opposition demonstrations, killing more than 800 people in one day. That massacre occurred 2 months after the military overthrew Egypt's first elected president. Now, 2 months after al-Bashir's departure, Sudan's own military council appears to do the same thing.
The Secretary General urges the Sudanese authorities to facilitate an independent investigation into the deaths and to hold those responsible accountable. The Secretary General urges the parties to pursue peaceful dialogue and to stay the course in the negotiations over the transfer of power to a civilian-led transitional authority as required by the African Union.
In Egypt, military leaders repeatedly said they were the guardians of the revolution and their only aim was to protect the state against instability. El-Sisi, who led the coup, has reasserted this claim many times ever since, despite recently changing the constitution in ways that consolidate the military's power and allow him to rule until 2030. The same thing is at play in Sudan among its military leaders. For example, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the head of the Transitional Military Council (TMC), has similarly talked of himself as protector of the revolution and insisted that he wants to ultimately see a civilian state. Experts believe whatever the military leaders might say, they have no intention of allowing civilians to govern Sudan. They are seeking to take full power and, just like in Egypt, proceed to repress every single type of opposition.
أعتقد إنه الشعب السوداني لم يكن موحدا كما هو موحد اليوم، وهو موحد بوضوح ضد المجلس العسكري وضد الانقلاب، وهو موحد بوضوح خلف إكمال مهام ثورته. المجلس العسكري بتصرفه الأخير هو حتى سمح بأن تذهب الثورة لمنحى أكثر جذري في معالجة آثار النظام القديم، وأكيد هذا المجلس هو من مخلفات النظام القديم، وهو يكرر في إيجاد أساليبه وفي إيجاد أدواته بصورة حتى أقل حرفة واحترافية.
After the fall of Mubarak, the military tried to maximize the role of the army in the new government while spreading rumors about their political opponents. They issued propaganda painting the military as Egypt's last hope, a belief that eventually made it easier for them to overthrow the government and take power. Sudan's military council today is giving the same speeches in an attempt to discredit its opponents.
وزي ما أعلنا والمجلس العسكري أعلن السلام الشامل لكل الحركات المسلحة، السلام الشامل لكل من يريد السلام، لكن والله لا نجامل حد في أمن وسلامة المواطن.
But it was not just through speech that Egypt's army prepared to strengthen its grip on power. Before the Rab'a massacre, security forces used violence on smaller scales, almost as a way to test the reactions of the people and the international community. They killed more than 50 people protesting the coup on 8th of July 2013, then killed more than 150 people a few weeks later. The reaction domestically and internationally was muted. The Rab'a massacre happened the next month. The military in Sudan also seems to be testing the waters. The TMC will be waiting to see the reactions from the likes of the UN, the African Union, and Western partners. But it is not just these foreign bodies that the TMC will be keeping an eye on. In Egypt, El-Sisi time after time thanked Saudi Arabia and the UAE for supporting him from day one. It later came to light that these Arab countries gave the Egyptian military over $20 billion to deal with the opposition and Muslim Brotherhood. It is probably no coincidence that the unexpected violent crackdown on protesters in central Khartoum followed a series of meetings between the leaders of Sudan's military and autocratic Arab regimes that are actively attempting to shape the country's future. Analysts say the rulers of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, no friends to democratic governance, are acting together to ruin the aspirations of Sudan's reform movement. These countries tried to support Omar al-Bashir's regime, and since he was toppled in April by popular protests, they have conspired to engineer a counter-revolution.
هناك دول تراهن على المجلس العسكري والانتقال المدني. من وجهة نظر هذه الدول هو تشكيل حكومة مدنية تحت وصاية المجلس العسكري، وأن يكون المجلس العسكري بصلاحيات شبيهة بصلاحيات البشير بعد أن أعلن حالة الطوارئ. إيه هي الدول دي؟ الدول دي الأمارات، السعودية، إلى حد ما مصر.
The revolutionary train in Sudan is now in danger of being hijacked and going somewhere none of the protesters want to go. If there is only one lesson Egypt's failed revolution can